Part of the mission of the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center is to transform lives through the arts, and not just on stage, but in the community. That's precisely what a group of artists has done recently with the story of a slave named Fortune.
The story of Fortune began in Waterbury, Connecticut in the late 1700s. A husband, a father, and a slave. Fortune's master, Dr. Preserved Porter, was a landowner and fourth-generation physician specializing in bone setting. Fortune worked the Porter farm until 1798, when he died from a fall, leaving behind his wife and 4 children. Rather than burying Fortune, Dr. Porter meticulously preserved every one of Fortune's bones, inscribing them with scientific names and reassembling the skeleton so he could continue to study the human anatomy. Fortune's bones remained in the Porter family, unburied, for over 100 years.
Fortune's bones in 1930 were given to the Mattituck Museum in Waterbury, Connecticut. The museum had the bones fully articulated so that they hung in the museum, and everybody who came to the museum got to see Fortune hanging there.
It wasn't until the 1970s that people began to look at the skeleton as more than a set of bones, but rather the remains of a human life.
When I first heard the story about Fortune, I think I had the same kind of horror and almost a sense of disgust that other people have, and a kind of anger because of the circumstance. There was a place in me that understood what this doctor wanted to know, and I respected that. I just didn't like the context, which was he could dissect this body because he owned it.
To honor Fortune's life and death, the African American History Project Committee, housed at the Mattituck Museum, commissioned poet Marilyn Nelson to write the book-length poem Fortune's Bones, the Manumission Requiem. Composer Dr. Esai Barnwell was later commissioned to set the text to music.
Marilyn Nelson wrote a phenomenal poem. And when people ask me about the process of composing, I tell them Marilyn Nelson's poem sang itself to me.
Dr. Barnwell's cantata was chosen to be the cornerstone of the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center's 10th anniversary season.
Marilyn, in a conversation, had talked about liking the sound of gospel quartets. And so I gave the choir the gospel quartet background, and that was the choral rhythm section and then the percussion that gave Fortune the energy to say, I am not my body, I am not my bones. In Marilyn's poem, when the doctor is singing about the dissection of Fortune, there's a statement that occurs again and again and again. He says, I'm humbled by ignorance. I am humbled by ignorance. One of the things that I thought about was, if Fortune were to come alive today, what sounds would he recognize? And what I thought was that he would be closer to the sounds of African rhythms. So I started the whole thing with a chorus of African bells. Bells are the way to waken the soul.
Community engagement is a vital part of the Clarice Smith Center's mission. So the center told the story of Fortune beyond the College Park campus in a year-long series of community events that culminated in a moving ceremony to celebrate the life of Fortune. The Prince George's County Public School System adopted the book for its 9th grade reading list, and panel discussions on the questions raised by Fortune's story and topics of ethics in medicine, research, and treatment were held.
Every community has skeletons. We have an obligation not to hold this as some little prized jewel, but to involve everybody in it. This is a project that really needs to be more than a performance. It needs to involve the community.
Fortune's story formed the cornerstone for other related events at the Clarice Smith Center. At one, University of Maryland author and distinguished professor of history, Ira Berlin, discussed the history and impact of slavery.
Slavery has become a regular feature in every manner of cultural institutions, schools, churches, museums. Why this renewed interest in slavery, if in fact slavery's been dead for almost 150 years? As a historian, and as a historian of slavery, I would like to think it has to do with a growing interest in the past and the way the institution of slavery shaped the American past.
This is a project that I think not only needs to be discussed among the academics, but this is African American history, this is American history, and Fortune is the catalyst, in a way, for us being able to discuss bigger issues. The more we know about our history, the more clearly we can see ourselves.